Please rate, comment, share and subscribe. If you dislike it, please tell me why so I can improve. This is a companion video to the video on mitosis, which I'm going to stick up a link to on the screen right now. If you're on the tablet, you won't be able to use that link. DNA in the nucleus of a cell is normally organised into pairs of chromosomes. So most animals and plants have an even number of chromosomes. They will have pairs and they will correspond. So for example, somebody might have a chromosome with a gene on it that's responsible for their fructose metabolism, and another person might have, and on the other pair they will have one, say, that doesn't work, and if somebody inherited both of those they would be fructose intolerant, something like that. The problem with that, obviously, with human beings at least and animals, is that if you imagine you've got 46 chromosomes, which most people have, if you then have children with somebody else who has 46 chromosomes, then that child is going to have 92 chromosomes, and then the next child along is going to have 184, and so on, and that obviously doesn't happen. That actually does happen in plants sometimes, and it actually tends to make the plants healthier. It also occasionally happens with human embryos, but those embryos are not viable. You can get triploid, haploid is half the number, diploid is the double number, the even number, and triploid is 3 times the number, and so forth. And in plants it's slightly different as well. It's also different in some social insects, where some social insects only have half the chromosomes of others, which is one reason why they are social insects. It's to the advantage of animals which have sex to have a variety of different genetic traits. The way they achieve this is by halving the number of chromosomes that they have in their cells, using those special cells to exchange genetic information or send genetic information to the other cells, so that those cells then combine and produce diploid cells which develop into new organisms. And that's generally, although not always, how reproduction happens in sexually oriented animals. And that process is called meiosis, and what it does is halve the number of chromosomes, so that each egg cell or sperm cell only has 1/2 the number of chromosomes of the person who's produced it, and only one of each pair of chromosomes, and then they pair up later. This is the process whereby it happens. The first process is leptoten. The leptoten is where the chromosomes separate in a similar way to the mitosis one. You probably should watch the mitosis video because it's got a lot of information which I'm probably going to miss out on this video. That's the first stage. The next stage is that the different chromosomes, and here I've assumed that the cell has got only 4 chromosomes, which is unusual. You wouldn't have many cells with only 4 chromosomes. They pair up so that each pair of chromosomes is together. That's the zygoten. Zygo, by the way, is cognate with the word yolk and with the word yoga. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Okay. Next one is the pachyten. The pachyten is called that because they get thick, as in pachyderm, thick-skinned, and this is because they need to be robust, and they tend to entangle themselves with each other like that. The prelude to synapsis, which is the exchange of segments of chromosome. Next stage is the diploten. The diploten is where the exchange is actually taking place, and you've got separation of chromosomes and you've got the swapping over, so that various traits are taken onto one chromosome but not the other, and they're swapped over. You can see this, for example, in my own children. My daughter is much more similar to me physically than my son is, but my daughter is intellectually very different from me, although she's emotionally more similar to me. And my son is intellectually very similar to me, but emotionally more like his mother. And that's because of the swapping over thing, I think. Also, you can see it in people's faces. You quite often see, and I've seen this with Sharada. Sharada, the top half of Sharada's face looks more like one parent, and the lower half of Sharada's face looks more like the other, which makes me think that probably the genes responsible for the different features of her face, or my face for that matter, are on the same chromosome, different genes in a row. I don't know if that's true, but I suspect that that's true for that reason. So that's that stage. You then get diakinesis. Now, diakinesis is where you have the newly swapped over chromosomes starting to separate and pulling apart. And then you have metaphase 1. Look at the metaphase in the mitosis video because that's relevant to this, where the spindles form and they start to pull apart again, but this time only with one of each pair on each side. So you've now got half the number of chromosomes. That's crucial, that is, only half the number of chromosomes. The next phase, again, is anaphase. Anaphase 1, there it is, having cleared it, and they're pulling apart and trailing, and I've illustrated the swapped over segments of chromosomes by making a sort of dotted line on there to show that they're swapped over, and you end up with 2 cells like that, but that's not the end. You actually end up with 4 cells. Each of those has now got half the number of chromosomes. Then you have anaphase 2, which is the final phase, where they're pulling apart and forming into 4 completely different cells. So then you have those pulled apart, they form into 4 different cells, which are gametes, such as sperm and egg cells, 4 cells, 4 gametes, and each of which has these swapped over things. Now, one thing I find interesting about this is it means that there are phantom individuals that are us, but the other way round, because each of these cells has got a corresponding one where the traits are swapped over. So, for example, those genes there are going to be the sort of opposite numbers of those genes there. And that means that each of us has a phantom individual that was never born, that would have been formed from the 2 gametes that formed us, if 2 gametes did indeed form us, which is not absolutely always the case, but is usually the case. I don't want to go into that here, because the simple version is, yes, that's how people form, but that's not really how babies are made, always, but it usually is. So that means for every one of us, there is a phantom opposite one. For example, if my father had had straight hair and my mother had had curly hair, there would be a phantom version of me with straight hair. If I had blue eyes and my father had had brown eyes, there would be a phantom version of me with brown eyes, and so on. And I find this very interesting because it means that out there, somewhere in an alternative universe, there will be these phantom versions of me, and obviously the reason that concerns me, and obviously my emotional investment in that is that somewhere out there in the parallel universe there will be a female version of me. Probably that female version of me is going to be gender dysphoric as well, and wish he was a man, so can't win really, can you? Anyway, I will see you soon.